A prickle of danger ran its way up her spine and stopped her in her tracks. She looked up and saw a man before her. No, not a man, a dragon. The dragon. Saskia turned on her heel and ran, barely feeling her feet touch the ground as she threw herself forward and as far as possible from him. Only, this time she didn't have the advantage of knowing the terrain. She turned a promising-looking corner and spotted the dead end 10 feet ahead. Doubling back, she found that the dragon was much closer than she'd like. Forcing back panic, she refocused her mind. "Keep going," she told herself, despite the terror trying to stick her feet to the ground. "You'll outrun him eventually." The next couple of turns, she glanced back and, with a glimmer of hope, thought she might have lost him. But then he appeared out of nowhere, and she was forced to plunge down the nearest turning. Saskia had at least time to think it was strange, the way he seemed to be chasing her in sudden spurts. She'd lose sight of him one moment, expecting to hear his footfalls doggedly beating a path towards her, only to be met with silence. Then he'd be there, at the end of a road, and she'd have to take the nearest exit to be out of his eyeline again. She took a left past a municipal building and realized the architecture around her had become increasingly grand, less residential. That meant she was somewhere near the city center, and that meant she'd soon know where she was going. Then, just like that, she burst out onto a huge rolling stretch of greenery she recognized as Linsery Park. She lurched into the parkland, thinking if she could cross it fast enough, she could lose him among its copses and crisscrossing pathways. Her thoughts were flying too frantically to form a solid plan, her mind acting on the first idea that came to her. But when she stepped foot on the grass, her mistake hit her. She realized all at once that the dragon hadn't been chasing her, he'd been herding her, driving her out into open ground for one reason. She heard the beating of huge leathery wings and risked a glance behind her, only to see a 50-foot-long dragon bearing down upon her. She didn't slow down, but even with her heart thudding hard enough to burst in her chest, she knew now that all chances of outrunning him were gone. There was no losing him when each extension of his wings propelled him forward faster than a horse's gallop. This was it. This was how she was going to go, burned like Loris, or, worse, shredded between those powerful jaws. She stumbled and fell, hitting the grass face first. She almost wanted to stay there and not have to look at what was coming, her inevitable death, delivered via razor teeth. But she was better than that. She'd been fighting her whole life. She wasn't going to give up that habit now. She flipped over and pulled the knife from her boot as the beast swept in to land before her. The gust of wind from his wings blasting leaves and blades of grass into her face. She swiped her sleeve across it to clear her eyes, intending to swing into a defensive crouch, but the temporary blindness had lost her time, and she felt a sharp, heavy weight land upon her chest, preventing her from rising. She blinked and looked down to see a single, curved talon pinning her in place, just shy of piercing her flesh. The dragon's huge head loomed above her, his golden eyes like twin suns in the sky. "Tell me, human, how did you manage to steal from me in the marketplace?"